What if I told you that baby boomers are entering retirement with very high rates of mental illness? Millennials are quitting jobs they love because they're breaking down more often, and burnout is now being diagnosed in people as young as 16 years old. And it's not because people today are weaker or lazier or less committed. It's because what burnout means and when it shows up has completely shifted generation by generation. Hi, my name is Lakshan. I'm your host for episode 38 of My The Gen Gap podcast.
And I am Goldie, your co host for this episode. Lakshan and I are both ICF credentialed coaches with a shared passion for understanding generational dynamics, not just in theory, but in real people's lives. Since we coach clients across all generations, from Gen Z college students to senior leadership professionals, we meet people who are burnt out almost every week. That's what led us to this topic.
We're going to be breaking this episode down into two sections. The first one, we're going to talk about when and how burnout shows up across the generation spectrum. And second, what we can do about it. Now, before we get into that, let's first establish one thing. What the hell is burnout? Cody, what does burnout mean to you?
Um, I mean, I could give you the theoretical explanation that, that you find everywhere. But I think having experienced it myself, in life, for me, it's definitely a moment where I'm dislocated from my mind and my body in a way that I could be performing very actively on my duties and getting things done, but it stops there. It's just getting things done and not feeling inspired or passionate about anything. So it's a dislocation from the mind and the body for me. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's a state of physical mental exhaustion that comes when you put a lot of effort for a long time, and in return
Mm,
there is a sense of pointlessness.
yeah.
Now, while the both of us have very unique definitions for burnout, this is what the World Health Organization defines it as. This is occupational burnout, mind you. So it says that burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It is characterized by three dimensions. One, feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion. Two, increased mental distance from one's jobs, feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job. And three, reduced professional efficacy. Now, as I said, this is what the World Health Organization has defined occupational burnout as, but burnout shows up well beyond just your job, right? And that's one of the things that we're going to be covering in the first part of this episode, which is when and how does burnout show up. When we think about when burnout shows up, it's important for us to talk about this because it doesn't hit everyone at the same age or for the
Mm,
same reasons. And when you zoom out, across generations, you notice something very interesting. Burnout used to be a late career experience, something that showed up in your 50s or 60s. But today it's showing up in your 20s, sometimes even earlier. Goldie and I have both, uh, we've spoken to a lot of people around this age, early 20s, late teens. And burnout is a fairly common phenomenon that we witness, which means that it's not an age thing, it's a context thing. It's the world you grow up in and the rules you are taught to follow. Now, let's take it generation by generation. And as we do that, I'll highlight some of the most common causes for burnout as identified by a Gallup study conducted a few years ago. Out of the top five reasons, the first one is unfair treatment at work. The second one is unmanageable workload. The third one is unclear communication from managers. Fourth one is a lack of manager support. And the fifth one is unreasonable time pressure. Now that we know what the top reasons are, it's going to be a lot easier for us to understand when burnout shows up for each generation. Let's start off with boomers, and in their case, it typically showed up, in their 50s and early 60s. And the reason for that is because, well, for the most part, they had structure in their careers. There were clear rules and expectations. Work meant stability. You joined a company, you stayed for the whole tenure. You didn't care about fulfillment, you only cared that it paid the bills and kept the family going. What they didn't have is emotional language, mental health support, and any sort of permission to press pause. So even though the expectations were clear, one of the things that is a reason for why burnout exists is unclear communication from managers, which is of course expectations. There is this imbalance between effort and emotional reward, and this constant go 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 attitude eventually caught up with them in the form of physical health conditions. This is cardiac issues, sleep issues, insomnias. In so many ways it manifests physically. Of course, there's also mental health illnesses that are shooting through the roof right now with this generation. Then we have Gen X, right? Now, with Gen X, burnout is a little different. It shows up in their early to mid 40s and it's quiet. Because this generation, well, the way it was raised, directly or indirectly, it was raised to handle everything by themselves. They were the first generation to come home to empty houses while both parents worked. They figured out dinner, homework, and surviving, taking care of the emotional survival all alone by themselves. One of the things that we spoke about multiple times in this in this podcast is the how Gen X were the latchkey generation, right? So by the time they entered adulthood, self-reliance had to be second nature for them. Now, while it seems like they're perfectly functioning on the outside, inside they're typically running on fumes. Right? They're the ones who stay up until 2 o'clock, uh, 2 o'clock at night, morning. I don't know what it means for them. 2 o'clock, 2 a.m. Right, and they wake up early to attend their children's parent-teacher meeting. And it's ironically their strong work ethic, grit, and sense of responsibility which contributes to this even further. And being the sandwich generation, invisible generation, all these terms that they seem to have, it doesn't really help their cause as well because they don't make any noise about it. Instead, they just go numb. Then we have millennials. This is an interesting generation because burnout shows up for them in their mid to late 20s. So that's a significant shift from mid 40s, early to mid 40s to late 20s. And the reason for that is because, well, think of it like this. Growing up, you were told that if you get good grades in school, you get into the college you want to get into. And if you do well in college, you'll get a great job. And then you get married, then you buy a house, then you start a family, and so on and so forth, right? And then the 2008 financial crisis hits. Everything they were told that would be the recipe for a happy, fulfilling life went out the window. And as life went on, they realized that they needed to do a lot more to have that happy, fulfilling life. Yet, today, people of this generation are struggling to find partners, buy houses, start families, or do the very things that are meant to give people a sense of meaning. When you continue to do more and more and more without the promise of getting the reward you worked so hard for, I mean, what else do you expect, right? So by the time burnout hits, it's never one big thing. It's like this one small thing, the straw that breaks the camel's back. You're struggling to send out this one email. You're pushing that one workout you were supposed to go for, like for weeks. And at that point, you realize that yeah, this is when they're like, I need to hit a full reset. Then we have Gen Z, and they're already burning out. Goldie and I have seen this. We talk to plenty of people, they're already burning out. And the reason for this is because they start to carry a lot more much earlier in their lives. They've grown up with uncertainty, a world that changes faster than anybody can keep up with, a lack of clarity, blurred boundaries, and too much information all the time. And I haven't even touched on the pandemic or AI, the way it's rising and moving
Mm.
right now. Basically, it's like they're dealing with most of the things that millennials had to deal with and more, but millennials had learned how to cope, Gen Z have not. So for Gen Z, burnout isn't loud. It usually shows up as quiet quitting. That was a very popular trend a couple of years back. Even now, it's still very common. And basically, what quiet quitting means is that there's a particular there's a level of apathy, disengagement, withdrawal, from whatever work they're doing. And it's not that they don't care, they really, really do. If they didn't, they would not come to us, to people like me and Goldie, for help. It's because they're exhausted before they even start. I came across a bunch of YouTube videos with the title saying, um, Gen Z are entering the workforce and they're already burnt out. Something along the lines of that, which is kind of scary. Yeah, so sadly for Gen Z, burnout isn't like a breakdown, it's like their baseline. That's all they know. Goldie, you've been coaching people for a lot longer than I have, and you coach people from, the entire spectrum, the generation spectrum, right? What have you noticed in your conversations based on the things I've mentioned so far?
I, you know, the one thing that keeps coming up as you were talking is how much this age gap between one generation and another keeps reducing when it comes to the definition of burnout. So if you're going back to the boomers, they are typically experiencing it in their 50s and 60s. I mean, you see that that's a substantial amount of life they've led, maybe in order to have those experiences and then think, oh, I'm fed up now. That's what it is. It almost seems, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it almost seems a normal time to face the burnout. Again, it's a disruptive statement to make, but it only comes from what I'm going to say next. If they're experiencing it in their 50s, you then went on to say that X are experiencing it in their 40s. So we're cutting off a chunk of 10 years for the next people. Millennials are then facing it in their late 20s and early 30s. So that's another 10 years cut off, or 15 years, I would say. And poor Gen Z are barely adulting and they are facing it, and let's not forget, physically, their prefrontal cortex is not even fully developed yet, but they are already having to face what we call burnout. So that is one thing that flags up immediately as you were, talking about the different generations. And yes, I also picked up on context. So the time in which you're living has a huge impact on when burnout arrives for you, which again is indicative of how fast the world is going. But let's not forget the human brain is still the same as it was thousands of years ago. So we are still that primitive limbic brain, but we are pretending that we've gone and advanced as fast as technology has. So I'm not surprised that Gen Z are burnt out before they even enter the workplace, because how much stimulus are they receiving much before they get real responsibilities? And in answer to your question, what's coming up in the coaching sessions is pretty much the same thing. I mean, I do coach leaders as well, C-level leaders who maybe don't complain about the burnout because they have more tools available to them to manage that stress and anxiety. But all the Gen Z that I have, coached, in fact, I just started a process this morning and we spent 10 minutes breathing in the session. Upon request, suggested by the coachee himself, which I think is indicative of how much they need that space, or in this case, a session with their coach to manage and navigate these feelings. And what strikes me is the burnout is very much related to the worry of the future. So when you speak to a Gen Z and they're feeling these episodes of burnout, it's usually because they don't know what the future holds for them. And they're worried about not getting that right job. They're worried about not meeting the expectations that they have for themselves. Millennials have already been through it because they've actually been through it and recognized, hey, this is not what I signed up for. And so it's delaying everything in their life, whether it's a partner, getting a home, having stability in jobs. Yeah, that's kind of the temperature that I'm sensing from what we've spoken so far.
Yeah, what you mentioned about this uncertainty about the future thing,
Yeah,
and essentially how their brain isn't even fully developed, right? It's like, how can you expect them to cope? Something
yeah,
that millennials have learned to do when their brains are not ready to
yeah,
learn to cope. They don't even know. It's like Their brains are still developing. Things are still moving faster. There's so much more that the brain has to like process. It's a lot. It's very demanding. In fact, as you were talking about this client of yours, I spoke to somebody yesterday last in the evening, a discovery conversation with this young girl. She's still in university. She reached out saying, "Hey, I'm doing this freelancing thing. I've started my freelancing career. I've been doing this for a year, video editing, which is
Mm,
typical of, of Gen Z, I suppose."
mm,
And she was saying that I'm stuck. I don't know. I'm not growing in my career. I feel like uh, I have the same number of clients now I had last year. I don't feel like I've improved much. I'm not clear on what to do with my life. I keep getting persuaded by what everybody else is saying. I don't know what to do. I keep comparing myself to other people. I don't trust myself enough. All of these things, Lord, like this
mm.
bombarding me with all these things, and I'm thinking you're thinking about a career and all of these things, and you're still in college. Like, but again, that's what they carry, right? They carry all of these
Yeah,
things, and I can't even imagine what it's going to be like for Gen Alpha moving forward. If this is what it's like for Gen Z, you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. No, no. It seems to just be anticipating in time as we move forward. That's the bottom line that I'm picking up here. Mm.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking about moving forward, let's get into the second part and segment of this episode, which is, well, now that we understood what burnout is, how it shows up, and when it shows up, what can we actually do about it? Right
Mm.
now, pretty much like everything else we talk about in this podcast, burnout also is something that needs to be addressed on a systemic level. There is absolutely no question about that, right? But until those systems are addressed and they shift, until workplaces evolve, until expectations are reset and society itself redefines what productivity is and means, we need something that we can control, right? Another thing that gives people a sense of burnout is not feeling like things are in their control whatsoever. And I believe that one of the most powerful tools for that is to find a sense of meaning. Because here's the thing, right? Burnout doesn't just come from doing too much, it comes from doing too much of what doesn't matter, or worse, doing what once mattered but no longer doesn't. That is one of the most heartbreaking realizations anybody can ever have, right? The Pew Research Center conducted a study on what it is that gives people meaning in life, and these are the top 5 points. Okay, first one is family and children. Second one is occupation and career. Third one is material well-being. The fourth one is friends and community. The fifth one is physical and mental health. There are of course more, but these are the most predominant five things that give meaning to people. Right now, if we look at this and think about it for a second, most of the time burnout occurs when one or more of these five areas are not being met, they're neglected or taken for granted, right? So the idea is to see how we can align ourselves better. Now, this doesn't mean you you quit your job, you move cities, you just get married to someone randomly or something like that. It's about doing micro adjustments, so to say. It's like saying no to meetings that drain you. It's hard, I know, but it helps. It definitely helps. Connecting with friends that you've neglected or you kind of drifted away from. I'm guilty of this. I've definitely started working on that. Seeking mentorship, mental health support. Hey, people like me and Goldie exist for this reason, right? And just allowing yourself to pause, stop, relax without feeling guilty all the time. Now, these are some of the solutions that my clients have come up with for themselves in our coaching conversations. So you will have to figure out what works for you, because this is a very individual personal experience. But at the end of the day, you just have to make sure that your actions are in sync with your values. I want to hear your take, Goldie. I know you have some interesting
Mm.
points.
Yeah, I think what you said about all the different suggestions definitely align with, you know, burnout remedies. I think what's very key to observe is, how well do you know yourself? Because this is important to recognize which is the solution that's going to work for you as a first step moving forward. So, you know, it's all very good to say, oh, say no to the meetings. Now, you tell a people pleaser to do that, it's the hardest thing in the world. Yeah. But if that same people pleaser finds it easier to maybe take some time out and do some community service, which is also a really nice burnout strategy, because what you're doing there is you're altruistically giving your time to some place or someone, and the rewards that you receive, we know very well, are rewiring the brain, and that's the science of gratitude. And it's so much easier for someone who's a people pleaser to do that, because they get joy from making others happy. It's a very different concept if you make another person happy by just keep saying yes to them. But if you're doing it because there's a no strings attached, so in this case, community service, that could be your antidote to burnout. Yeah. So I think it's very important to first ask yourself, who are you? And this is where maybe some coaching would help. Just, self-awareness, I think, is where it all begins. And even recognizing burnout is the first step to self-awareness. So, I would congratulate people for even just sort of saying, I have
That's true.
burnout,
That is true.
right?
Yeah.
It starts with the small wins, doesn't it? And it's progressive, because one of the symptoms of burnout is overwhelm. And if you are told by a professional or by someone who cares about you, oh, you need to work less, you need to spend time with your friends more, you need to go to the gym, you need to walk more, do your steps. Hey, that's really overwhelming, right? I mean, who are we speaking to? We're speaking to a person who has lost their compass in life, perhaps. And in order to reorient themselves, it has to begin with that one needle that just shifts in a small direction. So, self compassion, knowing yourself better, is, I think, the first step. And maybe you just need to sleep more. Hey, we don't know. So, you need to assess where you're at. And again, putting it into context, a baby boomer may really struggle to say no to meetings, because let's not forget they come from a time where for them stability was working. And, interestingly, a boomer may face burnout when they retire, because they don't know what they're doing in life anymore. And so maybe then what would work for them is to become a pro bono mentor for somebody else. I mean, these are just things that we think of when we think of context. But before even that, I think understand who you are in terms of burnout. And that could be as simple as having a conversation with somebody who's a professional or a trusted person in your life who is willing to listen to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the key thing that you just said at the very end is to listen to you. At no point did you say and give advice, right? Because as you said, telling
Yeah.
people what they have to do, what they need to do, I think everybody knows it. But the fact that they know that there are all these things that exist that they have to do is going to overwhelm them more, and stop them before they even get started on taking care of themselves. And I agree with you when you say that you know burnout is like usually the first step to kind of looking inward.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting perspective shift. It's a good one, actually a really good one. Yeah, see, I knew you'd come up with something interesting. I just knew it.
Yeah. That being said, I think everyone has to understand that burnout looks differently to different people. And I think respecting that about others is also very important. So, even identifying who in your community is benefiting you in this stage of life. And sometimes it could be as simple as distancing yourself away from certain individuals who are not ready to understand where you are and what you're facing. And that's just called boundaries, isn't it? There's a fancy word for boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you know what, Goldie? Everything you said, no, it I think very much aligns with some of the points that I brought up from the
The list.
Gallup study and yeah,
Yeah.
and the Pew Research thing. Because if I go back to the Gallup study, it talks about the top five things being unfair treatment at work, unmanageable workload, unclear communication for managers, which is, expectations not being set or not, no lack of clarity, lack of support, which again something you mentioned, unreasonable time pressure, right? And
Yeah.
what you mentioned with respect to, how a lot of boomers face burnout once they retire,
Mm.
it's because, well, one of the things that gives meaning is
Is missing.
occupation and work, right? It's the second most important thing is missing suddenly. You don't know what to do with your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
It's a scary feeling, of course,
I
with burnout.
think, yeah, it makes me realize that list you mentioned is clearly the umbrella of everything. So on a very simple level, I think what we'd like to tell our listeners and our viewers is go to the list and ask yourself on a pie chart what percentage is being covered of each section, and where there's a deficit, that might be an area of development for you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I like that you said development, because it's not like you're saying, hey, once you burn out, look at this list. It's saying, hey, look at it now, so that
Yeah,
you can preempt, you can, what could be the cause for burnout in the future, and to prevent that, right?
100%. Because we also know that burnout doesn't come, like, it doesn't knock on your door and say, hello. It's gradual, it's sneaky, it
Yeah,
comes unannounced, and it
yeah.
just walks in like a squatter.
All right. Cool. So, with that, we've come to the end of episode 38 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast. I've been your host, Lakshan.
And I've been your co-host, Goldie.
Thank you so much for listening, watching, and tuning in all the way to the very end.
Muchas gracias.
See you in the next one.
Hasta pronto.
Bye.
Bye.